Okay, thank you for those fantastic talks, which have really set the scene in terms of thought-provoking agendas and brought to the surface some of the most important challenges that we're working with at the moment. I'm your chair for this panel discussion, Professor Sarah Perks from Teesside University. I'm involved in curatorial strategies for creative nature recovery. You can see examples at naturalfutures.co.uk and in the stalls at lunchtime. So just to recap who we've got here on this panel so you can prepare your questions, we've got Zara Ravenscroft from the Environmental Agency, Jeremy Garside from Tees Valley Wildlife Trust, Catherine Corrigan from Natural England, and then Claire Ross and John Hart from the TVCA and the Net Zero Hub. So now we've got time for some questions from you, either live here in the audience or on Slido online. Please keep them short if you're online. And please don't ask the burning question that's on everyone's mind: how funny is John's stand-up comedy routine? But first of all, I'm going to start. So I'm going to ask the panel to briefly articulate what they really mean when they talk about collaboration with communities. And maybe how do we integrate nature here so it's not all about us humans? So, dare I start at the end? Sorry, I know you've just presented, Claire and John. Tell us briefly, what do you understand by collaboration with communities here?
I guess one benefit of Trees on Tees, it's going through a whole system approach, so everybody's connected. So residents will have the option to have a free tree, and so working with schools and communities, it means that we connect with everybody, and there are lots of connections that hopefully will come out of that.
Brilliant, John.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the way we see our work at the North East Yorkshire Net Zero Hub is it's very much sort of a people-powered transition to net zero. We're about enabling communities to transition in that direction, and supporting local communities to take advantage of their natural or industrial assets, to sort of take the net zero agenda into their own hands. Like, I was quite recently out at a place called Humshoff in Northumberland, just north of Hexham, which is near where I live, and also Fairs as well, more or less. And there's a community interest company there that's emerged out of the parish council called Net Zero Humshoff. We worked with them through a funding program we used to run called the RCEF, Rural Communities Energy Fund, which is about decarbonising heat and energy in areas that are very too far away from the major electricity and heat generating sites in our grid infrastructure, to be decarbonised that way, to generate their own projects. And we worked with them to develop a feasibility study for the right technology to pursue a net zero energy system in Humshoff. They're now installing a solar field at some land from a local farmer, which is a former limestone quarry, so it has no real agricultural use to that farmer. It's just sitting there lying fallow. That's going to have a solar field on it in the next couple of years, which is going to provide carbon-free power to 150 homes. And that's just one of the 104 projects that are happening in communities across the North East and Yorkshire.
Thank you. And Catherine?
Yeah, so collaborating with communities is really important, in how we engage with them. That could be through communications as well on social media, and our comms messaging. Creating comms that is digestible and approachable. It doesn't always have to be intense science and environmental information that the everyday person wouldn't understand. There's also some fantastic connecting forums in Teesside, connecting people for different causes, mental health, migration forums, forums around the cost of living. It's about getting involved in them and becoming a regular face. To collaborate, you need true co-design, and that's really important, to be led by the community. And how we do that is through authentic, transparent work with them, manage expectations, don't go to a community and then offer them everything and then disappear after the project's done. It's about legacy and building that trust in the sector.
Brilliant, thank you. Jeremy?
Well, the Wildlife Trusts have grown out of a movement that was very much about education and awareness raising and getting people on board with the sort of work we do. But we've recently set a target as a national federation of 1 in 4 people engaged with nature, or active for nature. And the thinking behind that is that for a long time, being involved with nature and conserving wildlife has been seen as a bit of a minority activity and a bit of a fringe sport, and that we're, easily perceived as being beardy weirdies and sandal wearers and just a tiny fringe of society. And what we've worked out is that if 1 in 4 people are doing something, then everyone starts to see that as the norm, and we really want nature and conservation to be seen as part of normal behaviour in society and not just a minority activity. So that's where we're working towards. But in order to do that, it's no longer going to be about simply turning up and educating people and making them aware. It's actually about empowering them and showing them what they can do for themselves, and then just letting them go off and do it. So if you want to hear more about that, Louise has got a stall in the area, wherever it is. Go and talk to her about her efforts there to just empower people and let them take nature forward themselves.
Thank you. Zara?
Well, I think a lot has already been said, and Catherine's made some absolutely fantastic points. What I want to say is, we've been doing sort of nature recovery and nature projects for a very long time, and I know at the Environment Agency, not just with the restoration, but also with the sort of policy, we've realised that we need to work in a more multidisciplinary way. So we're bringing social scientists into the projects and having these multidisciplinary teams that consider not just nature, but people together. And that's really, really important. And I think we've had some brilliant points made as well that, scientists and policymakers aren't necessarily the best people to communicate, and using and collaborating with the arts is really fundamental going forward. And what I just want to say is, prior to my life at the Environment Agency, I used to work and build aquariums and travel around the country. And there it was, we don't need to write a narrative or create a story. Nature is fascinating and amazing and brilliant. And we don't need to make anything up. We don't need to embellish anything. It's there. It's fantastic. And it's just finding that way, that nugget, that way in to communicate. And it always absolutely sort of, horrified me in some ways that you could have communities that live so close to nature but have no connection with it and have no understanding of it. And yet when you start talking to them, they were just sponges. And it's just, as Catherine, as everyone here has outlined, it's just thinking of new and innovative ways of engaging everyone, really, because it's not difficult. It's not difficult. The story's there, and it's good.
And if we can drill down on this a little bit, because there's quite a few questions coming in on the Slido that are around diversity. And I'm also super interested in how this all can be, as equitable as possible. So does any of you have some practical examples or solutions when you've dealt specifically with, engaging a diverse set of people? So any of the, methodologies or tactics or examples that you have, because we know it's so important. There's a comment here on the Slido about looking around the audience. We know that there's not perhaps the, diversity in its widest sense of people involved in this, conversation regularly that we would want. So, what are we actually going to do about that? Zara, have you got anything?
I think diversity is really important because the challenges that we're facing with climate and biodiversity loss affect everybody. So, and the only way we can really come up with solutions is if we have fair representation and, everybody is at the table and collaborating and involved in that conversation. And it is really, really hard. And I'm thinking about it specifically from, say, a career perspective, because it's a really competitive area to get into. It's really difficult, and there's a lot of competition out there. And what we're finding, and what we were finding, is that obviously it's easier from a position of privilege to then have a career in the sort of conservation sector or the environmental sector. And that's been a real challenge. And the Environment Agency has been trying to overcome that through various internships, so paid internships, diversity internships. So we can recognise that we're not representing the communities that we're serving and trying to get some more voices in so we can have that fairer representation.
Yeah, I feel like that's quite similar to arts and culture as well. So how there's apprenticeships or paid opportunities, I think is really important. Jeremy, how do you talk about this at the Wildlife Trust?
I think, we recognise that we've got a long way to go to really diversify our membership and participation and all the rest of it. It's a really difficult area to address because I have seen projects in the past that sort of rush out and pick people from particular sectors of society and drag them out into the countryside against their will and claim that that's about diversity. And it's not, it's about building from the grassroots, isn't it? Making people feel part of a process, but also ensuring that we don't do things that make anyone feel excluded from the process as well. So that comes right down to the images we produce of activities going on and the way we phrase our engagement materials and the approach we take right from the top and all the way through the organisation. I don't think any of us around this table and in the room want to exclude particular sectors of society, but actually turning that round into a positive action to engage more people from more backgrounds is really challenging.
Thank you. And Catherine, we've talked about this through collaborations, and it's something that's really important to us. Have you got, I know you've mentioned it already, have you got another maybe example of how this can be done?
Yeah, so inclusive engagement, it does take time, it does take trust building, sometimes resource to do it effectively. It's about managing expectations of different community groups and being relatable as well, understanding what people are experiencing on the day-to-day. For example, in winter, would you do an outside project when the community might have to go back to a cold house straight after because they're not putting the heating on? So it might be practical solutions around, after that kind of colder walk activity, going to a warm room, having a cup of tea, having an informal chat, and then they'll feel like it's a more appealing event that they want to go to. So it's about the day-to-day considerations. How can we entice and advertise this event to more people and make it more accessible to the everyday person? Don't be out of touch. It's about understanding the current social, political, economic, I can't say it, climate. But yeah, it's about just that day-to-day considerations in your everyday job.
Okay, if you can put your hand up from the floor if you have a question, and we'll get a mic to you. They're coming in thick and fast online, so I'm going to actually move on. So Claire, we've got a question about Trees for Teas partnership. How do you ensure that the right trees are planted in the right place at the right time?
So when we first started on this project, which is fairly new, it's only started in March, and members of staff only started in April, and I was told we wouldn't find sites for tree planting. That's not actually true. We've got quite a lot of sites coming forward. But it's easy to find sites to plant trees, but it's hard to plant sites that don't have ecological constraints. So we have to go through the due process of making sure that there aren't any issues. So carrying out as part of or supporting applicants with their processes if they've got to go through environmental impact assessments. So a key part of our role will be to helping applicants to basically do those checks. Obviously, any sites over 2 hectares, you strongly recommended to go through environmental impact assessment. But I know Forest Commission will look at stage 1 environmental impact assessments for everything over half a hectare. So, I mean, we are on top of this. I'm fortunate in that at the moment one of our part-time member staff is a botanist, and we're training our officers and offering training to our partners in recognising priority habitats. So we were on a training course yesterday, and we found a site that doesn't have any designation, but is clearly a priority habitat. So, I mean, I would like to reassure our audience that that is something that we are massively on top of, and we have to make sure that also UK forestry standard is followed in applying for any grants. So right tree, right place. That's the ecology stuff, but there's other stuff as well around public consultation and so forth. But a major part of getting trees in the ground is making sure that you've covered all of that and making sure that...
And do you have a range of different trees? I say this from a selfish perspective because I'm quite allergic to beech, so don't do too many of those. But also the important point is it's not about me. It's actually what's best for nature and, bringing together some of these ecosystems for insects, birds, like how, what's the array of trees that you use?
So we won't be involved in any commercial forestry, so anything that we're asked to help with any commercial forestry, we'll put that straight to the Forestry Commission. So we were looking at amenity woodlands for biodiversity. Interesting, the North York Moors National Park requests that 10% of the woodland creation is native conifer, and that's to help with funding the first thinning of 20 years to make that more economically viable. That's something we've got to consider. So we're talking about native woodland creation, properly gone through the right checks and properly designed, and we're supporting that. So it's a more complicated in urban trees. We're not averse to ornamentals because of the fact that you maybe have a smaller tree, or it's more appropriate to the location or coastal habitat and so forth. So we're looking at principally amenity woodlands for nature conservation, but also things around natural regeneration, wood pasture, tree standards in hedgerows, and also we've also been quite keen on where we can hedgerow creation, including urban hedgerow creation, for which there's not a lot of funding at the moment.
Great, thank you. If anyone has a burning question from the floor, do you pop your hand up? See any? Okay, maybe you're doing it online anyway. So actually, John, we've got a question for you here. With Teesside being touted as a future world leader in carbon capture and storage, should we be striving locally for net negative rather than net zero?
Yeah, I was looking at that one. It's a really great question. And obviously, I bring more of a wider geographical footprint than just the Tees Valley, because obviously, the North Eastern Yorkshire Net Zero Hub, we are the 4 Yorkshire Combined Authority areas, plus the 2 northeastern ones. And the North Yorkshire Combined Authority they're in a process of local government reorganisation at the moment. They have specifically set themselves the aim of being the first UK region to be carbon negative. I think the question is, it's a great ambition for Teesside to have, and Teesside has really some major, really exciting ambitions in this field, because I would know that and say that because I am sort of the writer and coordinator of the Tees Valley Net Zero Strategy. Teesside aims to be the first decarbonised industrial cluster in the UK sooner rather than later. Possibly, in terms of net negative, Teesside is the second largest emitting region in the UK. So it could well be, even once you take out about 2/3 of our local emissions which come from industry, there's probably... the specific nature of Tees Valley means that negative might be a stretch too far within the 2050 timeframe we're talking about. But that doesn't mean that our neighbouring authorities can't deliver that, and it doesn't mean that there aren't huge ambitions on Teesside that are just as important.
We should bear in context really what John said, that 60% of Tees Valley's emissions are industrial, and we have some emitters that have greater emissions than Manchester. So to really put that in context. So this is why carbon capture, utilisation, storage is so important to the industrial economy. We could stop those emissions immediately, but then what happens to the jobs? So this is a way of trying to, keep the jobs, but also track the and basically be stored underground. Where you get carbon negative is where you have an energy to waste plant known as a energy recovery plant, which is using organic waste from our bins, because that has been produced. So your vegetable waste, because it's as a rise as sort of photosynthesis. If the emissions from that are stored, then that isn't carbon negative.
Okay, thank you.
The thing with the North Yorkshire difference is they have a lot more anaerobic digestion power and energy recovery, and they have a much more developed bioeconomy and agriculture, which means that they can get to net zero, negative net zero, in a way that might not be possible.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. We've got a question from the floor.
Thank you, Sarah. Just pursuing the question about trees again, it's said that one mature flowering tree is the equivalent of an acre of wildflowers in terms of benefit to pollinators. It's important that the right trees are planted when it comes to pollen and also the hosting of aphids, which provides quite a lot of food for pollinators as well through the honeydew. So it's the right trees is very specific often.
Yeah, I understand that. We're plugged in now with the Nature Partnerships Natural Asset Group as well that are advising us on ecological issues. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the question. Okay, I'm going to start rounding things up. I want everybody to tell me on the panel one tiny thing, one small gesture that you think is really important to do for climate resilience. I was also thinking about what you said, Claire, when you said everything, everywhere, all the time. That's what we need to do, but it's just not going to be possible. So I would like everyone to think of one tiny gesture, one small thing that everybody could do for climate resilience. Jeremy, I'm going to start with you.
Well, in terms of climate resilience, I would say walk more and cycle more, because not only does that get you outdoors and into natural environments wherever possible, but a lot of our carbon emissions through transport are for journeys under 2 miles, and that just seems ridiculous to me when you can actually spend that time in nature, get somewhere just as quickly, and actually help save the planet at the same time. So if there's one thing, just consider every single journey you do, but particularly the short ones, which seem so easy to make in a vehicle, and that you could just enjoy them in a far better way.
Cool, thank you. Catherine?
I suppose accessible nature, things like planting. Not everyone has a garden, so it could be herb and containers and flowers on a 10th floor flat. It could be the community garden or community allotment. So engage with nature recovery at a local level and enjoy it as well.
Thank you. Enjoying is important. John?
Well, inspired by Jeremy, I'm not going to flea my dog this summer. But, I think it's slightly tangential, but the one thing I always say is, and a couple of the panel speakers today have mentioned it, I think we really need to start thinking more about mainstreaming net zero and climate change a lot more than we do, and not have it as a discrete thing that sits outside of our day-to-day lives, but it's actually integral into them. You know, for example, I think Catherine was talking about the net zero strategy for Tees Valley includes natural resources as one of the 5 pillars of it, but a lot of that is increasing the livability and attractiveness of our communities to people living here. It makes people want to come and live here. It makes people want to come and holiday here, and start thinking of net zero as a cross-cutting theme for everything we do, and not just something that sits alone in a silo.
Thank you, Claire.
I just say, learn about it. Every day is a school day, isn't it? Talk about it with your family, friends, you know, communities, schools. That there's quite a lot of influence by people working in companies as individuals to raise issues, you know, and push it and be a bit of a champion in your own workplace, in your community. Minor things, food waste. 70% of food in rich countries is wasted. I mean, you often hear people say it's 50%, 70%. That's including farm, so yeah.
Super. Thank you. Zara?
Well, I'll just be really quick because Claire stole mine. It was going to be...
Oh, sorry.
Jeremy still walking and then Claire still talking. So, but it's just talking. I think Tristan set the scene, didn't he, this morning? And he was so brilliant in what he's achieved and his passion and in the fact that he's just getting out there and talking. And you don't have to be a nature expert. You don't have to have a degree. You don't have to... But just talking and starting those conversations, like Claire said, because every tiny little action can have a big impact.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm already a Tristan superfan, going to be all over that YouTube. I just want to end very quickly with a quote from a book that I never shut up about. It's Donna Haraway's Staying with the Trouble, so I do recommend you read it if you haven't. It matters what matters we use to think other matters with. It matters what stories we tell to tell other stories with. So just going to leave you with that thought. I want to say thanks to Zara, Jeremy, Catherine, John, and Claire. Thank you for your questions and listening, and please don't forget to visit all the stalls around the building at lunchtime. Thank you.
Thanks, Mel.